Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. I think we'll get started. It's a couple minutes after the hour, and on behalf of the three organizations leading this initiative, the Lupus and Allied Diseases Association, the Lupus Foundation of America, and the Lupus Research Alliance, I want to thank you for joining today's program. I'm Dave Zook with Faegre Baker Daniels, and it's a privilege to facilitate today's presentation. As most of you know, we're here to discuss the release of the Lupus Patient Voices report, which is based on inputs from people who participated in the September 2017 Lupus Patient-Focused Drug Development Meeting, completed the pre-meeting survey, or submitted post-meeting comments. While we'll provide an overview of the report during this webinar, we certainly encourage all of you to read the report, which is now available at www.lupuspfdd.org. There's also a summary available in Spanish. Lupus Patient Voices is an important milestone for the community. In just a moment, I'll be introducing representatives of the three lupus organizations to provide an overview of the initiative. But first, a couple of logistical items. All of you, please mute your phone to limit any background noise. Even though I think we have all the participants on mute, we just want to take that additional step. Please know that you can submit questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try to address as many of them as we can after the presentations are complete. To do so, just send an email to info@lupuspfdd.org. Again, that's an email with your question to info@lupuspfdd.org. Please don't use the questions number that's on the webinar screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can, recognizing that we have limited time today. So let's get started with introductory comments from each of the organizations. We'll turn first to Kathleen Arntzen, President and CEO of the Lupus and Allied Diseases Association. Kathleen?
Thank you, Dave. Hello, and welcome to everyone. Almost 3.5 years ago, this community embarked on a lupus patient-focused drug development journey, and we are absolutely thrilled to finally release the Lupus Patient Voices report today. If I was there in person with you, we would do a standing ovation, so just think of that in your mind. On behalf of Lupus and Allied Diseases Association, I would like to thank everyone for participating in this landmark launch. We are incredibly proud of the entire lupus community for coming together and supporting this history-making initiative. We would also like to thank both Sandra Raymond and the Lupus Foundation of America and Ken Farber and the Lupus Research Alliance and their very dedicated staff for their efforts and collaboration, especially Pat Wildman and Diane Gross, and the Faegre BD team for always being there for us. This was a huge undertaking for all of us and a bit intimidating for LADA as an all-volunteer, patient-led organization. We are small but mighty, and we march among giants. And through our united efforts, we delivered. We are extremely grateful for the support of the FDA and industry sponsors and the participation of the many clinical experts, researchers, healthcare providers, and lupus groups. As an individual with lupus myself, I especially want to thank the people with lupus and their loved ones from the bottom of my heart who answered the call to action and stepped up to participate and promote this groundbreaking initiative from its inception. Kudos to all. You are absolutely rock stars. With the ongoing implementation of the 21st Century Cures Act, PDUFA 6, and FDA patient engagement efforts, the patient voice is more important now than ever before in advancing research and drug development. As people who experience lupus on a daily basis, we are considered experts on our condition. We have earned our place at the table we have finally arrived. The PFDD team wants you to understand how significant of a contribution your participation in the drug development and clinical trials process is and will continue to be as we move forward. Your personal stories and viewpoints impact decision-making and outcomes at all levels to both improve your own health-related quality of life, as well as the quality of life for the next generation of people with lupus. This is a huge step in the right direction, and we need each and every one of you to please continue to stay engaged and participate in efforts as we move along. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Our next introductory speaker is Sandra Raymond, President of the Lupus Foundation of America. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Dave. Hi, everybody. This truly has been a tremendous community effort. I want to thank every single one of you who made this report possible, especially those of you living with lupus and your families who completed the pre-meeting survey, who joined us online for the meeting, who traveled to Washington to share their personal experiences living with lupus. To us, you're heroes, and you are making a difference in the fight. I also want to thank our friends at the Lupus and Allied Diseases Association, especially Kathleen, and the Lupus Research Alliance, Ken Farber, for their partnership on this important initiative, as well as to our industry sponsors whose support enabled us to host the PFDD meeting and produce the Lupus Patient Voices report. Thank you also to the physicians and researchers who provided guidance and input to us throughout the practice. It's really amazing to see the power of the lupus community. Perhaps you don't know this, but more than 2,000 people completed the pre-meeting survey and 600 participated in the meeting itself, both in person and online. Your voices were heard loud and clear and are reflected in the report we're releasing today. As you will see, the report details many things about this disease that people with lupus really know, but perhaps others do not. Certainly, this report contains information on the important impact on daily life, the burden of existing treatments, and how lupus robs people of the things most everyone else takes for granted. So to all of us, this is not new. However, it is an invaluable new resource to the Food and Drug Administration and to the biopharmaceutical industry as they review and develop new treatments for lupus. This report is designed to be used by the FDA and industry throughout the drug development process. It can inform regulatory decisions at the FDA, not just during the approval process, but throughout drug development, from preclinical research to post-approval. It can be used to help guide the design of clinical trials, to identify endpoints and outcomes that are most important to those living with lupus, and to help assess benefit and risk. In short, it's an important new tool that will help improve the development of new treatments and make a difference in the lives of everyone living with this disease. We're so excited to share the report with you today and to take this important step forward in the fight against lupus. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Our final introductory speaker is Diane Gross, National Director of Advocacy and Programs for the Lupus Research Alliance. Diane.
Thank you, Dave. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Ken Farber, President and CEO of Lupus Research Alliance, he sends his regards for not being able to be here today. I do want to thank you all for joining us today, and Kathleen and Sandra have really detailed all the participants that it took to get us here today. So thank you to everyone who has participated in and supported the Lupus PFDD initiative. It's truly been a pleasure and an honor to work with my colleagues at the Lupus and Allied Diseases Association and the Lupus Foundation of America on this very important endeavor. The Lupus Patient Voices report demonstrates the significant unmet need in lupus. Those of you living with lupus or working in the area probably already know this, but our efforts in this initiative are to make sure that the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry know and understand this as well. It's very important that they understand what people with lupus want and what they need and what they go through on a daily basis. The science of patient input is an emerging and rapidly growing field, and the FDA's patient-focused drug development program is one of many efforts to develop systematic approaches to having meaningful patient input in medical product research and development processes and regulatory decision-making. The Lupus Patient Voices report culminates in a benefit-risk framework to help inform regulatory decisions concerning new drugs. The FDA developed this benefit-risk framework through extensive review and analysis of previous and ongoing regulatory decisions. The Safety and Innovation Act requires FDA to implement a structured benefit-risk framework in the new drug approval process. And the FDA sums it up very well when they say that assessment of a product's benefits and risks involves an analysis of the severity of the condition treated and the current treatment options available for the given disease. This information is a critical aspect of FDA's decision-making as it establishes the context in which the regulatory decision is made. FDA believes that the drug development and FDA's review process could benefit from a more systematic and expansive approach to obtaining the patient perspective on disease severity and current available options in a therapeutic area. So we are delighted today to release the Lupus Patient Voices report as an important tool in this process of informing the FDA as well as the pharmaceutical industry as they move forward in the development of new treatments for lupus. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Diane. We appreciate all three of you for setting up our discussion today of the details around the report. Before we move into that presentation, let me just remind everyone and those of you who've joined the call since we began that we do have an email address set up for questions that we'll turn to after the presentations. And again, that email address is info@lupuspfdd.org. Please send your questions there. So we have three organizational leaders presenting in this portion of the program, in addition to Diane Gross and Kathleen Arntzen, whom you just heard from. We'll be joined by Pat Wildman. Pat is Vice President, Advocacy and Government Relations for the Lupus Foundation of America, and will get us started on the presentation. Pat.
Thanks, Dave, and good afternoon, everyone. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes just going over some of the goals of the initiative, an overview of how we conducted it, potential uses of the Lupus Patient Voices report, some of the themes that are in the report, as well as the report structure. And then I'll turn it over to Diane and Kathleen, who will share a little bit more about the details that are in the report. First, with the goals of the initiative, it really was to understand the lupus patient experience and recognize patient preferences and risk tolerance. Also to examine the complexity and heterogeneity of the disease to help inform trial designs, and to create a practical, scientifically rigorous framework that incorporates patient preferences and patient-reported outcomes into lupus research and trials. And also, finally, to ensure that people with lupus really understand the value of their participation in the drug development process. And that's a really key point because, you know, as I think Kathleen and Diane both mentioned, and Sandra as well, is that we're in a time right now where there's so many opportunities for people living with lupus to play a big role in drug development, all the way from before we get into the clinic, all the way through clinical development and to approval. So this initiative really was a great example of how people can get involved and really make a difference. Just a little bit about an overview of the initiative. As Kathleen had mentioned, it began more than 3 years ago where the three organizations came together and expressed our intent to FDA to host an externally led meeting. This was not a meeting that FDA organized. They did support us in holding it, but this was a community-driven effort. And there are three main components to the initiative. There was a pre-meeting survey, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that really helped to shape the scope and the agenda for the meeting and collected a great deal of information that is included in the report. Then we had the meeting itself, which took place in September, and then now we have the release of the Lupus Patient Voices report. At the September meeting, I know a lot of folks on the phone were probably either in attendance or online. We had a tremendous response and participation in that meeting. Over 600 folks participated either online or in person. We had 2,000 plus participate in the pre-meeting survey, so clearly the lupus community is engaged. The topics that we addressed during the meeting, as well as in the pre-meeting survey, there were two main ones. One was patient perspectives on disease symptoms and the daily impacts on that matter the most in terms of quality of life. And then also patient perspectives on current approaches to treatments. We had two moderated panels of 6 people living with the disease or their representative speak to these topics. After each panel, we had a facilitated discussion among the audience to really dig a little bit deeper into the issues. And then we also had presentations from Kathleen presented on behalf of the community. We had a clinical presentation, and the FDA was an active participant as well in the meeting. In addition, we had live polling during the meeting. So after each panel discussion, we would have the audience participation, and we would ask audience questions and request people both online and in the room to respond via live polling. And then we did have an open public comment session. So there was a great deal of input from every participant who was either there in the room with us or online. In terms of the report itself, as I mentioned, it really captures a lot of the data that was collected in the pre-meeting survey, as well as what was discussed at the meeting itself, both from the panels and the audience discussion, and from comments that we received after the meeting was held. So all of that, in some way or form, has been captured and put into this report. I think it's really important to mention the potential uses of this report. It's not just something that's going to be read once and sit on the shelf and collect dust. This is something that's going to have value going forward and value to both FDA and to industry. It can be used certainly as a resource for the agency throughout drug development. It can be used, we're capturing patient experience data throughout this report. And it can also be used for drafting a benefit risk framework for drug reviews and to inform our next steps related to PFDD. And so this is a really valuable report, a lot of good content. As Sandra mentioned, it's things that as a community we already know, but it's things that FDA and industry really need to know and to get and to see that clearly. Some of the themes in the report: lupus has a devastating impact on the lives of many people living with the disease. It disproportionately affects women and minorities. It's a very widely variable disease, a lot of heterogeneity, resulting in challenges with diagnosis, challenges with treatment, clinical trial design, and drug development in general. Existing treatments have limited effectiveness and are often associated with substantial side effects. And people with lupus desire more effective and less damaging treatments and are eager to participate in the drug development process, as I think is evidenced by the number of people that participated in the initiative. In terms of the report structure, it begins with a summary of the report to provide the high-level view of the content. It has background on lupus and current treatments, and also some more detail about how the meeting was designed and our approach to data collection. It includes a summary of the findings from the pre-meeting survey as well as the meeting itself, specifically looking at impacts of the disease on daily life and perspectives on treatments for lupus, both current and potential. It also includes a draft benefit risk framework, and it concludes with appendices of participants, of the agenda, discussion questions, and the polling that was conducted during the meeting. And it also has the list of the pre-meeting survey questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Diane Gross, who will get into a little bit more of the details of the report. Diane?
Thanks, Pat. So we're just going to set the stage with a brief overview of lupus and treatments. You know, there are several types of lupus, you know, and as we know, it's a very heterogeneous disease where no two cases are alike, making research quite complex, more common in women and minorities, and you know, common symptoms being fatigue, joint and muscle pain, brain fog, photosensitivity, and rashes, the things that people experience more so. Then there's kidney disease and organ involvement, which are very important and underlying symptoms of the disease as well. So current treatments, only 4 treatments currently approved for lupus, of which only 1 was specifically developed for lupus, and we really hope to see that number go up. Many medications for lupus are used off-label, and many of the drugs have some very significant side effects that can be as serious as the disease itself. But I think the good news here is that there are a lot of companies investing in lupus drug development, and there are many promising late-stage clinical trials happening right now. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide shows some of the basic demographic information of the 2,100 plus people who completed the pre-meeting survey. What's not shown here is that 96.5% of survey respondents were female. So I think you see that we had a good distribution by race, ethnicity, and of survey respondents by age. You'll see we do have over 1% of respondents were under the age of 18. So respondents to the survey could have been people with lupus themselves or their representatives filling it out on their behalf. I would like to point out also that given the high prevalence of lupus with people in the Hispanic community, that the survey was also available in Spanish, and we did have people complete the Spanish version of the survey. Next slide, please. So among the survey respondents, you can see here from this chart, nearly 3/4, or 72.7%, reported having SLE without nephritis. About 21% reported having SLE with nephritis, less than 1% reported having drug-induced lupus, and then just over 6% having some form of cutaneous lupus. So this is the breakout as reported by people who filled out the survey. In the report, you'll also find a detailed table of this information broken out of types of lupus by the race ethnicity categories that were shown on the previous slide. Next slide, please. So the survey asked respondents to select and rank the symptoms that most negatively impact their lives. So to many of you, this may not be a complete surprise. Joint and muscle pain and/or swelling and fatigue were by far the symptoms with the most negative impact. But the survey allows us to quantify this information and show the impact. And the report includes more symptoms than listed here. As you can see from the last line, other symptoms are detailed in the report. But the report also includes quotes that very pointedly describe the extent of these symptoms and the impact on people's daily lives. So the survey also asked respondents to evaluate the impact of lupus and its symptoms on their daily life on their best and worst days. So this chart shows that even on good days, people with lupus experience mild to moderate level impacts on their life. So that would be the purple bars. So this chart shows that starting 1 is minimal impact, going up to 5 being high impact. The purple bars represent best days. So you can see that even on people's best days, lupus is still having an impact on their daily life. The red bar shows worst days, and very clearly showing that 1,212 people report that on their worst days, lupus has an incredibly high impact on their life. So this data, in combination with some other information collected from the survey, shows that for many people with lupus, their symptoms are under only moderate control. Next slide, please. So, continuing with this theme of lupus and significantly impacting activities of daily living, 72% of survey respondents reported that lupus impacts their ability to do one or more activities on a daily basis. So activities that frequently impacted by lupus, being able to be outdoors, participating in sports and social activities, tasks such as performing household chores, being able to, go to work and school on a regular basis, taking care of children and others, and intimacy issues with spouses and partners. And the report itself provides a bit more detail on this, and again provides quotes from people with lupus and their representatives detailing the impact of lupus on their daily lives. So it gives very specific examples of the impact. So, next slide. So the final slide in this section shows that people with lupus experience a worsening of symptoms over time. Most respondents to the survey reported that their symptoms are about the same or worse, regardless of how long they have been diagnosed. So just to help you interpret this chart here, the first grouping is people who indicated that they have been feeling better over time. The middle grouping is those saying about the same, and then the bottom grouping is those reporting being worse over time. And then the bars represent time since diagnosis. So I think what we see here is that regardless of the time since diagnosis, nobody is reporting, or the people aren't most reporting feeling better. They're reporting being about the same, and most are reporting that as they progress, that their disease is worsening. So, as stated earlier, lupus really is a disease of unmet need, and we really need to do better, and that we hope that the information presented in this report will help move us so that we, down the road, will see a flip in worse and better. So I'm now going to turn over to Kathleen Arnson.
Thank you, Diane. I'm going to cover in this section of the slide presentation the treatments, clinical trial interest and participation, and key takeaways from the report. Current treatment summary points include information that individuals with lupus often take multiple types of medications and supplements to manage their symptoms and reduce disease activity, and they use a combination of prescription and over-the-counter as well as non-pharmacologic approaches. The most negative aspects of treatment, according to the survey respondents, are absolutely the side effects and the number of pills or medications taken per day. Side effects such as cardiovascular disease, weight gain, increased risk of infection, diabetes, bone loss, and sterility, just to name a few, can be quite severe and increase the burden of the disease itself. People with lupus also take many concomitant drugs, making it challenging to determine whether symptoms are related to the disease or are actually side effects of the numerous treatments. And due to the heterogeneity of lupus, no two people are alike, as Diane said previously. They're just like snowflakes. So there is no uniform treatment. What works for one person may not work for others, and treatment regimens must be adjusted frequently as effectiveness seems to decrease over time. Next slide, please. Common treatments are various. As we all know, there are only 4 treatments that are actually FDA approved for lupus, and there's only one that was developed specifically to treat lupus. So among respondents to the survey, antimalarial agents were the most common prescription medications taken to treat lupus, followed by corticosteroids, immunosuppressive medications, anti-inflammatory agents, and analgesics. Prescription aspirin and biologics were used less frequently. In addition to prescription drugs, many people also take over-the-counter medications such as nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs, and analgesics for pain, as well as supplements such as vitamins and minerals, and herbal teas and other natural products. Non-pharmacological approaches include diet modification, exercise, heat and ice packs, massage therapy, meditation, and other mind-body approaches such as yoga, nerve stimulation devices, acupuncture, physical therapy, prayer, and rest. Next slide, please. This is a diagram demonstrating the factors that impact treatment choice. When survey respondents were asked what they viewed as most important when choosing a treatment, nearly half, at 48.9%, said the most important benefit would be improved symptoms. The other half of respondents were split almost equally on 3 other important considerations: delaying or preventing symptoms, 16.6%, slowing down organ damage, 16.6%, and increasing life expectancy, 14.8%. Next slide, please. Survey respondents' treatment preferences. The survey asked individuals with lupus and their representatives what the most important result of a new treatment would be, assuming there is no complete cure for lupus. Just over half of respondents, at 57.5%, expressed a desire to feel better and go about their daily lives more easily. And approximately a quarter of respondents, 26.2%, indicated that having fewer long-term health problems, such as organ damage, would be the most important to them. 10.2% favor a treatment that would extend their lives, and only 4.1% prefer an easier plan of treatment, and 2% prefer a less costly overall treatment plan. Next slide, please. We also included questions about clinical trial participation and interest. With all of the potential treatments in the pipeline and the many trials taking place across the country right now, we felt that it was critical to include this. Approximately 1 in 7 survey respondents, or 14.2%, indicated that they had participated in a clinical trial, which included both observational and interventional studies. Their most common reason for participation was a desire to advance research, followed closely by a trial being recommended by a doctor. The vast majority of respondents, 87%, who had participated in a study indicated that they would join a trial again. Of those who had not participated in a trial, about 1 in 6, or 16.6%, responded that they had tried but had not been eligible to participate. Most respondents, 73%, indicated that they would be willing to participate in a research trial, which is fantastic. The factors that would most impact their decision on whether to participate in a trial include whether the treatment would improve their quality of life, there might be negative side effects from the treatment, and the travel time and distance to the research trial site. Other factors chosen by fewer respondents were the possibility of receiving the new treatment versus placebo or current treatment, and whether the trial requirements are difficult or easy to follow. People with lupus desire more effective and less damaging treatments, and they are very willing and eager to participate in the drug development process, and they urge the FDA and drug developers to pursue better therapies. Next slide, please. The report demonstrates the importance of patient engagement in the drug development process and the significant value and impact that people who actually live with the disease have by sharing their personal experiences. The second takeaway is the value of patient experience data and how it will be used throughout the drug development process from preclinical to post-approval as a means to inform regulatory decisions at the FDA and drug development within industry. And you heard Sandra speak to that at the beginning. The third Diane covered when she spoke is the significant unmet need in lupus due to the lack of efficient diagnostic tools, effective therapies, and well-designed clinical trials, as well as the benefit-risk trade-offs that may be acceptable to those with lupus, as well as the urgent need for the FDA and drug developers to understand both. Next slide, please. This is an informative slide again to remind you that we are taking general questions and comments. You can send them during the webinar and we will try to address as many as possible, or you can email them to us after the webinar. To learn more about the Lupus PFDD initiative, visit the website that was established from the very beginning. And to read the report, which will be posted immediately following the webinar, visit the page on the Lupus PFDD website that is designated for the report. When I'm done speaking, we'll flip back to this to take questions. Next slide, please. In closing, we would like to again extend our sincere appreciation to the many, many stakeholders in this wonderful community whose contributions not only made this important initiative possible, but also successful, including the countless lupus groups and other patient advocacy organizations, researchers and healthcare providers across this country, our biopharmaceutical sponsors for their support and generosity, the FDA, and most of all, again, the people with lupus and their loved ones who courageously shared their personal journeys, bared their souls, and believed in the project. We could not have done this without you. This is our collective victory. Thank you so very much.
Thanks very much, Kathleen, Diane, and Pat, for walking our audience through a really complex process and the important results, and giving them a sense of the potential impact on lupus treatment development. We're going to turn now to some questions that we've received from our audience. I'll invite one of the presenters to field the question, and then others may wish to comment. Once again, as you see on your slide there, we're taking questions at info@lupuspfdd.org. We've got about 10 to 12 minutes to try to address a handful of these, so let's turn to the first one. Kathleen, I'll keep you on deck. As has been noted in the presentations, the lupus population is very diverse. Is it your opinion that the process used and the way the report reflects the results, that really that captured the diversity of the lupus community?
Thank you, Dave. That's a great question. When people actually go to the report, they will see that we state several times, although we had a mighty force across this country pushing the pre-meeting survey out to as many different populations as possible. And when we chose our participants for the meeting, we tried to reflect as diverse a population as possible on the panels and in the invited audience participants who came into Washington and actually participated actively in the meeting. We had no control over who did take the survey. We were very happy that that over 2,100 people did answer the questions on the survey, and that we had such a robust attendance at the meeting. We felt that our panelists did reflect the diversity of the age, ethnicity, and race, the time to diagnosis, the years diagnosed, the type of lupus, geography based on their zip code, and number of treatments they took. So we thought it was a win as far as the participants were concerned. The survey, again, may not be reflective of the entire lupus community, and we did not have control over who may or may not have taken the survey. We did our best by also having it in Spanish and distributing it at a camp for children to get pediatric input. And we did as well as we possibly could there. But again, we have a disclaimer in the report that states that some of these questions may not be reflective of the entire lupus population. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Kathleen. Any additional comment there? If not, I'll turn to the next question and invite Diane to respond to this. The question is, we understand that not all of the several dozen PFDD meetings that have been held and the Voice of the Patient reports that have been produced included a survey, a pre-meeting survey. How did this impact or improve the Lupus Patient Voices report? Diane?
So I think that this pre-meeting survey really enhances the report and the data that we can provide to the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry. We were able to ask quantitative and qualitative questions, and over 2,100 people responding to the survey. So we have a very, very broad input. So I think it really improves the report because we really are able to quantify some of the anecdotal stories that we repeatedly hear. So, for example, in terms of the symptoms that most negatively impact people's lives, we hear a lot about the joint and muscle pain and the aches and pains and the fatigue. But with this data, we're really able to show that nearly a third of people report each of those things as really having a negative impact on their life. So I really think that the ability to present quantitative as well as qualitative data only improved what we could provide.
Thanks, Diane. Important point. Any other observations from presenters?
This is Kathleen. I just want to add that the survey allowed so many more voices to be heard. It supported and drove the meeting content, yes, but it allowed people who could not be there in person and might not be able to participate in the webinar the day of the meeting to actually go in and share their stories through the survey question. Thank you.
Important point. Thank you, Kathleen. Maybe just moving to a slightly different altitude, another question here from our audience. We understand, this one I'll direct to Pat, we understand that the FDA is working on a broader patient-focused drug development initiative within which this meeting fits, and that includes specific guidances to industry and communities around patient preference inputs into drug development. How will all of this broader work impact the value of the Lupus Patient Voices report? Pat, do you have a thought on that?
Yeah, so I think that this report comes out at a very good time where the science of patient experience data is evolving, and the recognition by both FDA and industry of the value of patient input, patient experience data. So it's coming out at a very, very good time where this information is being used. So it's very important in that respect. It's also important, I think, too, in the fact that this is an evolving science, and I think the agency and industry, to a certain extent, are learning from what the patient community is doing in collecting data from individuals living with diseases, and so I think it has value there as well. And it certainly will inform ongoing work as the agency does come out with some of these guidances surrounding PFDD. So again, it's a very good time for this report to be coming out.
Thanks, Pat. Any other comments? All right. And again, we'll be moving up and down, I think, in specificity here a little bit as we work through the questions. Diane, can you describe how respondents were invited to participate in the survey and where they were identified and pulled from? What sort of approach was used to generate geographic diversity?
So what we didn't show here is that we did have incredible geographic diversity. I don't know a count from representation of states. We did collect zip code information. We know that we had people from metropolitan areas, from rural areas, and from across the country. This was done, so the three organizations all did extensive outreach through our various databases and sending out e-blasts and such. Other organizations within Lupus or even others shared the information that the survey was available as well, social media, etc. But I would like to say, though, that the surveys were also available in paper, and we did hand surveys out, knowing that not everybody's online, nor is everybody comfortable about putting personal information online. So we were letting people know that they can have a copy on paper. We were handing out copies in paper. So we really tried to blanket every which way we could, making sure that at support groups across the country, in-person events and online. So we did very, very extensive outreach, and anybody with lupus or a representative of a person with lupus was eligible to fill out the survey.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Any other comments around that effort? No, it was very significant. One question back to Kathleen. Is there an opportunity to use the report, the content, also to inform providers, healthcare providers, in addition to the value that it provides to the FDA and to drug developers? Do you see a use there?
I always think that there's opportunities when you create such a tremendous tool as this report and the actual meeting recording. I know that all of us have connections throughout the rheumatology, nephrology, and healthcare provider communities for the groups that do treat people with lupus. I think that there's opportunities for us to partner with professional societies like American College of Rheumatology, American Academy of Dermatology, and the nephrology organization, as well as the NIH and the different institutes like NIAMS, NIAID, that could put this information out to provider communities. I always think as a person with lupus myself that it's very important for people who live with a disease to be part of their treatment team and to have effective communication strategies and skills with their healthcare providers. I believe that if we engage the lupus community who participated in this initiative to help share the link and share the report with their healthcare providers and promote it through social media. And I think it could only advance a greater understanding among providers about what the people go through on a daily basis, which isn't really covered during your average office appointment. There's just not enough time. So I'm going to challenge and charge the entire lupus community with the responsibility of helping us to disseminate this very wonderful report and the links to the website, the recording, to healthcare providers and others in the community to multiply and grow the effectiveness of all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Other thoughts, observations on that question?
Yeah, if I could just add to that, following this webinar today, we will officially release the report, and all three organizations will sending out e-blasts to our entire databases, which include a lot of providers. So we will be reaching them, but I also emphasize what Kathleen said, let them know about it, hand it to them, forward them the e-blast. We will be making lots of effort to reach providers, but we encourage people with lupus to, use that personal connection with their providers and share the report with them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Just a reminder, we've got just a couple more minutes, still fielding questions at info@lupuspfdd.org. Pat, I know that this has been observed a few times, really the heterogeneity and specifically the manifestations of the disease by ethnicity and race. Can you talk a little bit about, and perhaps others will as well, the impact that factor had on the development of the report and its value going forward, that diversity?
Yeah, I think it's critical. That's part of the lupus story, is the heterogeneity of the disease, and capturing it through both the pre-meeting survey as well as the meeting itself is critical to really present a big, the picture of lupus. So showing that diversity was a very important part of this report, and we were very conscious of that coming into this, and that's why, and I think either Kathleen or Diane mentioned earlier, when we were identifying participants, we wanted to make sure that we had that diversity. And so I'm very pleased that we did capture it both in the meeting as well as in the pre-meeting survey.
Thanks, Pat. Other comments on that question? We've seen that come up now several times in the audience questioning. All right. Well, we're nearing the top of the hour, so I'm going to take this opportunity to thank Pat, Diane, and Kathleen for walking us through this information, helping us to understand the process, the content, the results of the meeting, and the value of the report, how that will be used to impact therapy development, the follow-up activities that will be coming on, and really getting a better understanding of how the organizations have approached this strategic initiative. So once again, I would recommend that all of you turn to the report if you haven't had the opportunity and really become familiar with its content. We'll keep the question line active for some period of time. The report itself, as you may know, can be found at www.lupuspfdd.org, along with the Spanish language summary. So on behalf of our sponsoring organizations, the Lupus and Allied Diseases Association, the Lupus Foundation of America, and the Lupus Research Alliance, I want to thank everyone for joining today's presentation and look forward to follow-up. Take care.